Name of narrator is William Robert Franklin. Name of interviewer is Caroline Cockrell. The date is Friday, October 13th, and it's 11:30, and we are at the Ruth Patrick Science and Education Center. The interview assistant is Ryan Stockner. Now, can you tell us when and where you were born?
I was born in Arlington, Virginia on 17 April 1965.
So can you tell us about where you grew up?
My first 11 years I lived in Virginia, first Arlington area, Fairfax, and then Triangle, Virginia, which is right next to Quantico, Virginia. At age 11, my family moved to South Carolina, locally here to Jackson, South Carolina. And I've been in Jackson ever since, other than, of course, my military career.
Can you tell us about your family?
Let's see, my father is 79 years old. He obviously retired. Very well educated, very quiet individual, quiet emotionally, and my mother is absolutely the opposite. Loud, rowdy, some might even say hillbilly. But my father and I, we have a very close relationship, and still do a lot of things today. My mother and I, our relationship's a bit torn, but we still speak.
In high school, what did you like to do in your free time?
Let's see, I was actively involved with the high school ROTC, the NJ ROTC. I was into academics and cars and girls.
And after graduation, did you go to college or work or?
When I graduated, shortly after graduating, I went straight to boot camp, went straight into the Navy. I went in the Navy in August of '84. I got off active duty in July of '93. I immediately went into the reserves. And in '94, I believe it was in '94 that August of '94 that I started USC. I went to USC for 2 semesters, and the second semester my divorce processed, so I dropped out. And I came back to USC in 2015.
Okay. How old were you when you knew you wanted to be in the military?
Can I give a story?
Sure.
Okay. In the 8th grade, I was in study hall class, and typical kid, study hall. 5 minutes in, you're kind of laying your head down, and all this, and about 10 minutes into the class, this gentleman walks in, and this was a mobile unit, so when the door opened up, you've got the sun shining behind him and all that, and all you see is a silhouette, and this hard charger comes strolling in there. And I mean, his uniform was sharp, it was crisp, and he had that V look about him. He was just everything that that you would expect to see in a hard charger. And the door closes behind, and you see this rack of ribbons on his chest. And he starts telling, basically he was recruiting for the NJROTC, which at the time, he was our brand new ROTC instructor. We had 25 students in the entire class. By the end of the semester, or by the end of the 9 weeks, we had 128 in the class. And he had recruited me and several of my friends. And at the time, my hair was down to my collar. And of course, that was one of the biggest things that all of us had was, do we really have to cut our hair? Oh, no, not at all. Just, trim it up. Just above the ears. That's a lot of trimming. But shortly after that, after getting in his class, and my father being in the Army for a short time, he was drafted. But Ronald Allen Swafford, Master Chief, Quartermaster, and one of the first Navy SEALs. He was handpicked by Roy Boehm in 1961 when John F. Kennedy assigned the SEALs, or had the vision for the SEALs. So at any rate, he was a huge influence on me, and it was about that time that I knew I was going in the military directly after high school.
All right, so that's what made you choose the Navy, was meeting him?
Yeah, I talked to several recruiters. I could never get a hold of the Air Force recruiter. I don't know if the guy even came into his office or answered any telephone calls. The Army recruiter was trying to promise me way too much stuff. I mean, according to him, I could probably be in NASA flying a shuttle by my third day of boot camp, you know. He was promised me all kinds of officer programs and all that stuff. Basically, one of those deals of too good to be true. And I wanted somebody that was going to be a straight shooter. And the Navy recruiter was really good. The Marine Corps recruiter was too busy putting down the Navy recruiter to give me any advice on what he could offer me. So, you know, I kind of looked at my situation, and I chose the Navy.
Okay. How did your family react to this decision?
Well, both my mother and father were very proud and supported me very strongly. My family, and I've recently done an ancestry thing and gone back all the way up to 1700. And I've had family in the military. My father was in the military. My grandfather was in World War II. My great-grandfather, I had family members in the Civil War, family members in Spanish-American, Revolutionary, you know, and Indian wars as well. So we've got a long history of veterans.
Okay. How would you describe boot camp at the Naval Station, Great Lakes?
It was interesting. It was considerably different than what it is today, and we had well, of course, sleep deprivation was the first couple of days, and you're getting to know people that, you know, from all walks of life, and it was very mental. It was physical, but it was very mental, and but I think that I went in there very prepared for it as well. I actually enjoyed boot camp. It was, you know, you've always got sea stories afterwards, and sea stories kind of stick with you.
What was your recruit division commander like?
Let's see. I remember he was Cuban, and on Saturdays he was a chief petty officer, and then we had a first class petty officer. The chief would come in on Saturdays and he'd PT us, and he'd bring his son in, and his son was probably about 4 or 5 years old. We're out there doing push-ups, and his son has come sitting on our backs while we're doing push-ups and stuff. He was pretty cool. I mean, he was a hard charger. So.
What would you say was the hardest part of boot camp?
The first 2 weeks, they call that it's when you're, you know, most people, especially at that age and during that time period, your first time away from home. So you end up with like a culture shock, if you will. You get a lot of people that miss home, and so I think maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks of being away is the most difficult for everybody, and that included me. It was my first time flying. And I enjoyed it. My first time being away from home for that amount of time, and it was a culture shock, and suddenly you have no control on anything. I mean, you have no control on what time you get up, what time you go to bed, anything like that. What you're going to eat, where you're going to go, you know, you've got no control, and the first couple weeks of surrendering that control and realizing it is very difficult.
Do you think that boot camp changed you in any way?
It certainly changed the way I fold my clothes. I still fold my T-shirts the way I did in boot camp, although I reverse one fold just to be, you know, kind of a bad boy, I guess. I've always been somewhat militaryish. My father was very disciplined. In high school, of course, Master Chief Swafford was very disciplined. And so I think that I went in with a certain amount of discipline. And there's a esprit de corps that's taught. So yeah, I guess I fine-tuned some discipline and learned a lot about tradition and created a brotherhood.
Where did you go after boot camp?
Directly after boot camp, I went to apprenticeship training, which was there at Great Lakes. And then I went to my A school, which was Great Lakes. It was Hospital Corpsman School. And after that, I went to Naval Hospital Beaufort for the first year. The funny thing is I requested to extend for another year because I was getting married. And the Navy turned it down. Shortly after turning down my request, due to budget discrepancies and this kind of stuff, everyone who was on their first term was extended involuntarily. So I got what I wanted, even though it wasn't by request.
And you were part of the 3rd Battalion, 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit?
26th MU, yes, Marine Expeditionary Unit.
So where were you stationed?
And completing a task. The military is very big in completing tasks and therefore, and success. And therefore the military does, definitely prepare you for school or anything.
Do you think that USC Aiken is a good place to be a student veteran?
As the president of Student Veterans Organization, we darn sight better be. But I think USC Aiken, when I came here in '94, we did not have the VMSS that we do today. We didn't have the SVO that we have today. When I came in here, there was nobody to tell me anything about veteran benefits. I was completely lost in the sauce. Professors really did not care what my background was. And I guess it was very discouraging, and I felt like I had no support in any direction. Today, we look at veterans in a different way, and the school is extremely, extremely veteran friendly. The VMSS, we have the most successful VMSS in the area. We have other schools, larger schools as well as smaller schools, that come to us to learn what we're doing and how they can apply it to their school. Our school is very veteran friendly. Our professors are much better about the way they treat veterans, and we have a huge veteran population within the school. So I think USC Aiken is really a wonderful place for veterans.
Can you tell us about your present family?
I have, I guess, what you might consider a non-traditional, which in today's times almost become traditional or accepted, the norm. My wife is 3 years older than I am. When we married, and she's my second wife, I'm her 5th husband. She had 4 children, I had 1, and together we have a basketball team. My children are grown. Let's see. My youngest daughter was in the Marine Corps. My middle son was in the Marine Corps. My oldest son married a Marine, and my oldest daughter did the Air Force National Guard or Air National Guard. I have 13 grandchildren, and I've got 1 on the way. My youngest son just got married August a year ago, and everyone, for a while they kind of spread out with the military and everything, but now they're out of the military and everyone's come back home So, we still do the family events and all that.
That's good. What do you like to do in your free time these days?
I like to hunt. I like to fish. I like to camp. I ride motorcycles. I've ridden motorcycles since 1986. I've always had Harley Davidsons, and so I do a lot of the Harley Davidson rallies and different events. A little bit out of the norm, I do competitive barbecue cooking. And so I go North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and compete in barbecue competitions. I'm also a Kansas City Barbecue Society master judge, so I've gone all around judging other competitions and stuff. So keeps you occupied. I also enjoy auto mechanics and that kind of stuff.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I would like to teach school in the Aiken County School District. I'd like to teach at Silver Bluff High School. I keep progging people that I have over there that, hey, listen, this person doesn't need to retire for another 2 years. Once I graduate, they can go ahead and retire, and I can slide in their spot. But I'd like to teach history at Silver Bluff High School, and maybe work in administration as well.
Is there anything else you would like to say before we finish?
Not that I can think of. Although coincidentally, the same date as this interview, it's the Navy's 242nd birthday. It's also the day that I graduated boot camp 33 years ago.
That's awesome.
So, well, pretty cool.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I was up at Camp Lejeune, 3rd Battalion, 10th Marines, Artillery Unit, and then we attached to the 26th MEU, and I did Desert Storm and a couple med floats with 26th MEU.
So what kind of activities were your unit involved in?
When Liberia, our unit actually split up. It was the first time since Vietnam that they'd done a cross-decking in the fashion that they did. I started off on the USS Whidbey Island, which was a smaller amphibious ship, and half of our unit went to the USS Incheon, and half of them stayed on the Whidbey Island. The Whidbey Island went to Liberia, where we supported the basically the Liberian Liberia was going through another one of their civil wars, and we were protecting the embassy there and protecting U.S. citizens there, and evacuating a lot. And then we also, we met up with the Incheon again and supported Desert Storm. We continued to conduct our Mediterranean cruise, and then we supported the Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So we were all over the Med, and then in Kuwait.
What was your specific job?
I was a Fleet Marine Force hospital corpsman, so I was a combat corpsman attached to the Marines. I did all their medical, including their preventive medicine. I maintained their dental records and dental readiness, and their immunizations. I did their first aid. I did sick call. I did more significant medical as well.
And how long were you with this unit?
I was with them for 4 years.
Can you walk us through a typical day that you might?
Well, in garrison, in the rear at Camp Lejeune, I would start off with morning formation, and normally I'd get up around 5 a.m. and formation was normally about 6:30 or 7. after formation, we would go to our workstations. In my case, I'd go to the battalion aid station, where I'd conduct sick call, and I was also the education training officer. And normal routine, daily stuff, sick call, maintaining records, that kind of stuff. In the afternoons, we'd meet back up. We'd have another formation. And hopefully your day was done. On Thursdays, we always had a field day, which was considerably different from what it is today. And Fridays, if everybody passed their field day and the day went well, about 1600, 1700, you were released for the weekend. We stood duty every 4 days, which wasn't a bad duty. In my case, it was medical. And when we were on the ship, it varied. Now, I spent a lot of time in the field, and that included the deployments. We did a lot of field ops there, but not a lot of time in garrison time. When we were on ship, you'd get up in the morning, you'd have breakfast, you'd shower, do breakfast, have a formation. There's not a lot for Marines to do on ship, so we PM or preventive maintenance on our vehicles, on our guns, on our personal weapons. We would do a lot of physical training, a lot of PT. It doesn't matter how big or how small the ship is, you run laps around that ship until the gunny gets tired, and it doesn't matter how much the ship is swaying back and forth. It's kind of funny, 1 minute you're running uphill, then you're running downhill, depending on how it sways. So it's kind of interesting and tears up your knees, but it's kind of fun too.
Did you then transfer to the 2nd Marine Division?
Well, 2nd Marine, the 26th MEU was part of the 2nd Marine Division.
Okay. Where did you go after that then?
Well, I was in one of those situations. I was up for reenlistment, and my wife at the time she didn't care for the military so much, and she didn't care to be away from home. So while I was up at Camp Lejeune, she was here in Aiken, which meant that on weekends I was driving 5 hours, 6 hours to come home one way. At the end of my enlistment, I wanted to re-enlist, and I wanted to re-enlist to come closer to home and keep the family going, that kind of stuff. And my wife and I discussed my re-enlistment, and she basically gave me one of those famous ultimatums of, you can re-enlist, you can stay in the military, and you can do it by yourself, and we'll make it legal. Or you can get out, you can go back to school, and we can have a family. So I got out at that time and went to the reserves and went 4th Med Division, or 4th Med Battalion. And about a year and a half later, we were in process of divorce. So I should have stayed active duty. Men do some of the stupidest things, somehow revolved around a woman.
So what was your unit involved in the 4th Medical Battalion?
The 4th Med Battalion is a reserve unit, and once a month you have drill, active drill, 1 weekend a month, and then 2 weeks a year you're doing your active duty time. And it was the same thing. We were supporting, when I was in Augusta, I was supporting a motor transport platoon. And then I transferred to Marietta, Georgia, where I was with H&S Company. It was still 4th Med Battalion, but I was supporting H&S Company. I was very fortunate. I volunteered for some active duty time. Went to Alaska for 2 rotations, 6-month rotations, and then I was activated for Iraq.
So after that, where did you go?
After Alaska, I came back and I volunteered to go to Iraq. It was kind of funny. My new wife, my wife had just retired from the Navy, and I had volunteered to go with the Marine unit when they went to Iraq. And so when the orders came in, the way the Navy and the Marine Corps the right hand and left hand don't talk. I was not chosen for orders because the Navy and the Marines didn't talk to the Navy didn't talk to the Marines were activated. I didn't get activated with those Marines. When the Navy was activated, my wife was activated, but they didn't activate me because they thought I went with the Marines. So I had to request to be activated and take my wife's orders, being that she had already retired. It took me 3 weeks to actually get those orders, and then I went to one MEF out in Camp Pendleton. And the Navy's real good about if there's something that you think that you don't want to do, that's exactly where they put you. When I was at Parris Island, I had no desire to be at a battalion aid station. I liked being at the clinic. I went to a battalion aid station and it was far superior. Really enjoyed it. I didn't like early mornings. Still don't. And so when they closed down the battalion aid stations, I was sent out to ICT, Individual Combat Training, the battalion aid station out there. I didn't want to be out there because, again, early mornings and late nights. Sometimes these guys are up at 4 in the morning and sometimes they don't finish up until 1 in the morning. I went out there and it was like independent duty. It was great. It was absolutely incredible. Well, same situation when I went to Camp Pendleton. My senior chief, who was from my unit, he asked me, he says, I was first class at the time, asked me where I wanted to be stationed or where I wanted to be assigned. And I told him, anywhere you want me, senior chief, I'll do whatever you need. And he says, well, I've got a senior chief who is retiring. He's the S1 officer, and we want you to take his spot. S1 is admin. And I'm one of these guys that I like being out in the field. I like being active. I hate being behind a desk. And I'm like, are you really sure you're putting the right man in the right position? And he says, oh yeah, this is where you need to be and this is where I need you. And so I interviewed with a senior chief who was retiring, and he asked me, he's like, so, what do you know about admin? Not a damn thing. I appreciate the fact that y'all pay me, but I don't know a damn thing. He says, well, that's not a problem. I understand you're pretty good running troops, though. I said, yeah, I'm pretty good with people, and I'm pretty good with, with subordinates and running a group. He says, that's what I need. These people know how to do their job. I need somebody to, keep them under control. Well, that's not a problem. So I was doing the S1 job. I was actually doing a senior chief's job in the S1 office as a first class petty officer. And I was one of the last ones to be deactivated. And there were 3 of us that were deactivated at the same time. We actually had to get permission from the base general to be deactivated. So it was pretty cool. We did a lot of great stuff while we were out there.
Is there anything else we've left out of your military service that you'd like to tell us about?
Not that I can think of.
And when did you say you left the military?
I got out, I retired August of 2005.
Why did you decide to retire?
It was conflicting with my civilian job a lot. When I made Chief Petty Officer, as an example, we went through an initiation, training, whatever you'd like to call it, training season, Chief's training season, basically 3 months of a lot of time getting training slammed into you and a little bit of initiation involved in it. And it involved, it was taking a lot of time away from my civilian employment, which coincidentally was a government job, but they didn't support me as well as I needed. And they weren't allowing me the time off as I needed. And so between my civilian job, my military requirements, and home life, and I have 5 children, and now I have 13 grandchildren, it was taking a lot of my time, and it was time to retire.
So what'd you do after leaving?
I worked with the sheriff's office for 6 years, and I was the lieutenant over at the detention center. Quite interesting work. Anyone that's a sociology or a psychology major needs to spend some time over there and maybe do some papers from over there, you know.
What was it like being a civilian after being in the military for so long?
I think because I was in the reserves, the adjustment wasn't as great, or maybe I didn't notice it as much. I still use military time, and I still get questioned about it, and I still do. I use a lot of military terms. I still throw out a Marine Corps grunt often, and sometimes it doesn't get the reception that I'd like. A lot of people don't understand what people did in the military. When I first got off active duty, when I did medicine in the military, I was independent duty basically. I worked with a doctor a telephone call away. I did things that nurses can't do, nurse practitioners can't do, physician assistants oftentimes can't do. And I was a general corpsman with the Marines. I was well trained, but the military is terrible about certifying. So when I got off active duty, there were not a lot of equal positions, shall we say, in the civilian market, especially if you're not certified. You know, you can get a job making minimum wage as a candy striper, basically, as a medical assistant, you know, who really doesn't do much more than TPRs, temperature, pulse, respiration. And now that's done with electronics anyway, so you really don't need anybody. But what you did in the military does not equate to the civilian market. The leadership in the military, the camaraderie in the military, far, far, far different from the civilian market. It's just, so there were a lot of things that I needed to adjust to. And of course, when I first got off active duty and not having job placement, and at that time the GI Bill was not like it is today. My first two semesters of college I paid for cash. At that time the VA was not looked at in a positive way as it is now. And so we didn't go to the VA when we got off active duty. I have never made a claim for anything that I did in the military. Other than my GI benefits of my schooling, I've never made any GI Bill claims. I've never made any VA claims. During my time period, one, you didn't do it because you were expected to take care of yourself. And two, the VA didn't have the reputation that it does today. And I don't think the military or the VA combined really looked out for you leaving active duty, transferring or transitioning into the civilian world. So it was far different. Today there's a lot of great programs available. There's a lot of people that are leaving the military today that go straight to the VA. They put in their claims. They get a lot of benefits that just weren't available when I got off active duty.
When did you return to college?
As I said, I went to college in 2004 for like a semester and a half, and then I returned to college the spring semester of 2015, I believe. And so I've got 2 years under my belt, I guess.
So why did you decide to go back to college?
I was one of those people that kept talking about, I need to return to school. I'm going to go back to school. And of course, economically, you look at it and it's like, I'm busy raising a family. I don't have time. There's always that procrastination or that excuse. My children were grown. I was working full time. And then I left the sheriff's office, and my grandchildren needed somebody to take care of them while my children were deploying. And at one point, I said, I'm done. Papa daycare is done. When my daughter gets back from deployment, I'm starting school. And it was just time. I needed to finish what I started.
And what are you majoring in?
Secondary education. I'm going to warp the minds of the future.
So that you would say that's why you chose the major?
Yes. I've always been a history buff. I think the problem with history today is that people don't teach history, they teach dates and names, and there's always a story behind it. And I think people need to know why we do things and not just what they're fed, you know.
For most students, college is a big adjustment. Can you say the same?
For most students, college is a big adjustment. For me, keep in mind, I haven't been in high school for 33 years. I graduated in 1984. I haven't been in formal school for 20 years. I came back in, and everything's electronic. The students walk around campus with an iPhone in their hand and seldom look up at you. They almost walk into you oftentimes because they're so engulfed in this. The earbuds and all this stuff. To me, this kind of behavior is completely rude, but it's also very different. So I'm transitioning to, I'm a 52-year-old man in an 18 to 24-year-old demographic. And school is considerably different from what it was. As I said, with the technology, the electronics, etc. I actually missed some assignments. One of the first semesters that I had a professor who had us put things on Blackboard and submit things electronically. I didn't realize, I'm used to having something in, a hard copy on paper, etc. So I did my reports and stuff, and I saw that it was due on Saturday evening, and I'm like, oh, they must have made a mistake. They mean Monday morning. And so on Monday, I brought my paper in class, and they're like, what's this? It's my assignment. It was due Saturday night. I'm not accepting it. What? So, all this is a complete shock if you have, and again, the technology. I think that I'm way behind a curveball compared to most students who have been in the military for 4 years or even 8 years and then go in, because they have that technology in high school. And they have that technology somewhat, in their lives. Everybody's playing with computers, everybody's playing with electronic games, of course the social media, all that stuff. And computers were, personal computers in 1984 just didn't exist. I remember the first computer that I bought, there was no internet. You bought a computer and it was either a word processor or you could buy it with a modem, but it basically, it didn't connect to anything. You had to buy your programs and all that stuff. So again, the transition is not only transitioning from active duty to school, or from the military to school, but it's also a considerably different transition because it is 33 years after high school.
Do you think that serving in the military prepared you for college in any way?
I think serving in the military, while it may not prepare you specifically for college, it prepares you for life. You do have more discipline. So even though I procrastinate, I prepare my lesson plans. I prepare what I'm doing. I have more discipline, with my schoolwork versus my social life. I think that I've got more maturity. Well, I'm 52 years old. I darn sight better have a little bit of maturity. But I have a little bit more maturity. I have more experience. I have experience You know, the university does their ICE events, intercultural events, which is really great. But I've lived a lot of what they're teaching. I've lived a lot of these events already. So for someone like me, I'm well beyond that. I kind of wish I could just exempt it, you know. So yeah, I think that in some ways it prepares you because it prepares you with a discipline. And that's not just for college, that's for life in general. And